Welcome to Scary World of Ghost Files. Today we are going to share Jinn horror stories. First story, Jinn, my first encounter. Hello. I have many stories to share. This is only one of them. I'm a Middle Eastern woman residing in one of the Arab Gulf states. Though considered Muslim, my family has never observed religious commandments. The only time I saw my father pray was once in the month of Ramadan, about 20 years ago, when I was 6 years old. Me and my younger brother were so fascinated by this strange ritual we were seeing our father perform that our absorbed staring made my father burst into laughter and order us out of the room so he could pray in peace. Though we were not religious, I remember my mother introducing us to some topics related to religion. One was the stories of the different prophets. I remember liking the prophet Yusuf because I was fascinated by the idea of someone so beautiful you'd accidentally cut your hands as you peeled fruit in your awe of their beauty. Also because my kid mind concluded that the palm lines on our hands were a result of those spellbound women cutting up the palms of their hands. I don't know why I thought that. My mother also taught us about the different creatures God created. The angels from light, humans from dirt, and Iblis, arch nemesis of humanity, from fire. She never mentioned anything about the Jinn. I don't remember who warned me first. Perhaps no one did. When I started first grade, all of us students somehow knew not to use the washroom designated for us first graders. The school I went to from first to fourth grade was a small one. We had one social worker for all the school population. I can't remember for sure, but I think there were only 3 classes for each level. The first grade level was situated outside, as in, when you went outside the classroom, the sky was your ceiling. The second, third, and fourth grades, on the other hand, were situated inside the school building. The shared washroom of the first grade level was in a separate small building behind the small building that contained our classrooms. Early on in the school year, I remember sitting in a circle at recess with a bunch of my classmates as one girl told us the score. The Jinn, you can't see them, but they live in bathrooms. In cupboards too, but mainly in bathrooms. Don't stay long in any bathroom when you use it. Don't sing in it. And don't make loud noises or stare at yourself in the mirror for too long. Be careful not to slip and fall. If you do, you might accidentally fall on a Jinn. They will be mad. Do your business and leave quickly. Don't bring toys or stuffed animals into the bathroom. Make sure not to let the door to the bathroom open. If you follow these rules, you will be fine. We have a lot of Jinn in our house. That's how I know these things. She went on. If you leave them alone and don't offend them, then they will leave you alone and won't hurt you. But the washroom here, it's no good. The Jinn there are already angry with us. Never go to our washroom. Hold it until you get home. That's safer for you. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of that girl. I ended up visiting her once. The first of 2 times my mother allowed me to visit a friend in the course of my childhood, but that's a story for another day, and yet her name escapes me. All I remember is me staring into her face as she spoke, and being transfixed by the weight of her words and the color of her eyes. She was the only girl in our class with light eyes. They were a mesmerizing mixture of hazel and green. None of us talked about the angry Jinn in the first grader's washroom for the most part, but when we did, it was in whispers. Don't talk about it out loud, and don't talk about it for long. If you do, they will come for you, maybe even at your own home, in your own bed, in the middle of the night. After one too many incidents of students wetting themselves or sneaking into the bathrooms designated for the older kids, our class teacher, in the presence of the school principal and the social worker, tried to reassure us, first with words. The Jinn, like Iblis, are created from fire, she told us. They, just like humans, have the capacity to choose to do good or evil. They lived in an invisible world of their own. They only appeared to prophets and holy men, though. So no, They don't live in the school washroom. Instinctively, we knew better. The adults were lying to us. When she saw that her empty words meant nothing to us, our class teacher decided to go with the punishment route. Whoever was heard talking about the jinn in the washroom, or wet themselves because they were afraid of the jinn in the washroom, or snuck into the older kids' washroom, was summoned to the front of the class, scolded in front of everyone for telling stories or stupidly believing lies / breaking the rules, and then hit 10 times on each palm of their hands with the dreaded wooden ruler. The plastic ruler was usually used when we got punished. The wooden ruler was for especially bad misbehavior. And the metal ruler was supposedly used to dole out the most severe punishments, though I'm not sure our teacher ever used it. The fear of punishment meant that we talked even less about the threat we knew to exist and devised ways not to have to use the washroom at school. For my part, I made sure to drink very little water during school hours. Some classmates made a pact with each other. If you just had to go to the washroom, wait till recess. Take 2 friends with you to the washroom, so that while you got inside the stall to do your business, they were outside reassuring you that you were not left alone with the jinn, and they were ready to sprint and call for help if need be. One fateful day, I had no money to buy the usual chocolate or cheese croissant from the canteen at recess, and so I decided to drink the big strawberry juice box a friend offered me, so I wouldn't go hungry for the rest of the school day. Our system at school at the time consisted of 6 periods. These started from 8 a.m. and ended at 2 p.m. After the 3rd period, at about 11:30 a.m., we had recess for half an hour, or so I remember. That day, I felt the discomfort of a full bladder by the 5th period. I tried to project a calm exterior, but inside I was starting to panic a little bit. I told myself that I could make it till I reached home. When the bell rang and the last period began, our grade's much-hated PE teacher entered the class and informed our class teacher that our class was to report to the nurse's office for our scheduled vaccination. I can't remember what we were to be vaccinated for, to be honest. At the sound of that, I became really distressed, and my bladder felt like it would release its content at any moment, though I still tried to hide it to the best of my ability. We were organized into lines and marched to the nurse's office, where we found the 1st graders from the other 2 classes there as well. There we stood in queue to get our injections. I stood last and felt like I could not handle one more second. I started shivering despite all my attempts at self-control. The PE teacher looked at me with derision and mockingly asked me if I was scared of the injection. I shook my head no, and she laughed. She then asked me why I was shaking if I wasn't scared. That caught the attention of our class teacher, who noticed me shivering, and so did the other girls. By then I was about to pee myself. I was so scared of that happening, because then I knew I was going to get punished by my teacher in front of everyone. And in those days, the physical pain of corporal punishment terrified me, and that I would also be mocked mercilessly by my PE teacher, who would use it to humiliate me every PE period, which she did to other girls. That's when I said that I needed to use the bathroom. Frowning, my class teacher told me to go quickly and then come back straight for my shot. I wanted to ask her to let someone come with me to the washroom, and then thought better of it. I went out of the nurse's office feeling strange. I felt numb, but was panicking at the same time. I thought of going to the older kids' bathroom, but was so scared I was going to get caught. The accursed washroom was a 5-minute walk away from the nurse's office. Since all the 1st graders, accompanied with their teachers, were getting their vaccinations, and our classrooms were far from the other levels' classrooms, no students or teachers would be around the washroom when I got there. I would be all alone there, just me and the jinn. As I contemplated these thoughts, my legs did not stop moving. It was as if I was in one of those dreams where dread fills your heart, and you know you are walking to your doom, but you can't do anything to stop yourself. Except this was reality. I reached my classroom and then walked around the building. When the washroom's building came to sight, I stopped. It wasn't run down, of course, but it was an old building with faded and peeling white paint. I could feel my heart start to sink, and my brain screamed at me to turn back and leave. But I felt like there was no way out for me. The adults were giving me no choice, and I was just a scared child. I switched myself to autopilot, and my legs just moved. I entered the washrooms building and shut the door gently behind me. It was a swinging door, and so I could not leave it open. The washroom had a strange smell. Not particularly foul, but not nice either. Everything was faded shades of lime green. There were 6 stalls, and they were all open. 3 of them had Arabic-style toilets, and then the other 3 were Western-style toilets. I instinctively went for Western-style toilets because that's what we had at home, and because I made a split-second decision that the Arabic-style toilets, which you had to squat over, would leave me exposed much more than the Western-style toilet. I entered the stall, closed the door, sat on the toilet, and started to pee. My bladder was very full, and it was taking me some time to empty it, and as seconds went by, I was losing the numbness, and the fear was starting to foreground itself more and more in my brain. When I was finally done, I washed up and dried myself, but I hesitated to flush the toilet. Would the noise that caused make the Jinn angry? I quickly decided to close the lid of the toilet as a compromise, and then got out of the stall and closed its door behind me. I went to the basin to wash my hands quickly and get out of there, intent on making as little noise as possible. As soon as I turned on the water, though, my eye caught the mirror in front of the basin, and I noticed something. All the doors of the stalls were closed. I froze for a moment. All the stall doors were open when I got in. I knew they were. There were no footsteps of anything other than me during all the time I was in the washroom. As the horror of that realization dawned at me, I heard a creak. I watched in utter horror as the door to the stall that I used started slowly opening. As the door was opening, I glimpsed the lid of the toilet, the one I had closed, upright and open, and then I bolted out of there. Never ran so fast in my life. I don't remember much of what happened that day. I only remember that I was sick for a week. I didn't want to stay home from school, though, because that meant I would have to stay home alone till noon, since both my parents worked and my other siblings would be at school. I remember being so scared to tell anyone at school, for fear they would tell the teacher and I would get punished. I ended up only telling my light-eyed friend. She knew the truth, and so my secret was safe with her. Second story, real Jinn encounter. I specifically created an account simply to share my experience with this community in particular, or rather, the initial experience of my uncle, which has traumatized me and members of my family for well over a year now. I'm not going to ask anyone to believe what you are about to read, but regardless, this is 100% true. And no, I'm not just saying that to rack up some points or subs. The following story has actually happened to my family members. Before getting into the details of the incidents in question, it is essential that I provide a brief background on the kind of person who was at the center of all this. My uncle, my family in general, and the setting. So please do bear with me for a while. I come from an extremely religious Islamic family, although I'm an atheist myself, with deep roots back in my native country of Pakistan. My direct family, mother and father, are the first from a ridiculously large extended family to migrate and settle outside of Pakistan. I was born and raised in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. With that being said, the incident in question occurs at my village back home. It's a very small village with exactly 8 houses and 1 mosque. There's no need to get into the details of the houses, as that is not where the incident occurs. Needless to say, however, that the village community in question is a very, very close-knit Islamic community. The male members of this community pray 5 times a day, every single day together at the mosque. The outing to go to the mosque in unison and pray together is largely considered to be a sort of bonding ritual amongst members of the community. This includes the early morning prayer session as well, known as Far, conducted right before sunrise. So even at 5:30 a.m., you could find a group of 8 to 10 individuals praying at the mosque. then returning home for some shut-eye before getting ready to leave for their respective works. Every single prayer session, every single day, was conducted by a sort of high priest/caretaker of the mosque, known as an imam, in Islamic terms considered to be in a position of great religious significance. The imam lives alone in a small shack right beside the mosque. Now, my uncle was the holiest of all the holy members in my uber-religious, strictly Islamic family. He prayed 5 times a day at the mosque, never late for a single prayer session. At times, he would be the first one to arrive for the far prayer session and find himself standing outside of the locked gate of the mosque, indicating that he was there earlier than the imam himself. The only person with the keys to the main gate of the mosque was the imam, and hence, he would be the only person who would open the gates during the far prayer and subsequently close them during the last of the 5 prayer sessions in a single day, known as Isha, conducted after sunset at around 8 p.m. My uncle was so freaking religious that he knew every single verse, prayer, and statement from the Quran, the Islamic holy book, by heart. You could tell him a random verse from the Quran, and he would be able to tell you which page and line number that verse was from, for example. His biological clock was adjusted such that he would wake up at 5 a.m. sharp every single morning, conduct the wudu, the Islamic cleaning process preceding a praying session, leave for the mosque, pray, and come back and get some sleep for another hour or 2. He never needed an alarm clock. If by any chance his biological clock let him down one early morning, the sound of the prayer blaring over the mosque's loudspeakers would surely wake him up, in which case he would rush through the aforementioned processes in record time. This was largely possible due to the close proximity of the mosque to our house. With all that being established, apologies if I seem to have digressed. Now, to the actual incident itself. One such morning, during the far prayer session, my uncle was awakened by the sound of prayer blaring over the speakers of the mosque. Like a well-oiled, well-drilled machine, he shot upright and breezed through the process of wudu, covered up accordingly, and left the house. The first thing he noticed when he stepped outside was how unusually dark it was. Like maybe it was 2 or 3 a.m. instead of 5:30 a.m., at which time you can at least see a tiny slit of light over the horizon. Thinking nothing of it, he continued onward, only to realize that he did not understand a single word he was hearing over the speakers. Now a person of strong religious faith and knowledge, such as what my uncle possessed, would in no way in hell mistake the common/general surah prayer, said to initiate a praying session. There aren't 5 different surahs to initiate 5 different prayer sessions. There is but only one common or general surah, known as Surah Fatiha. Look it up, said at the very beginning of each session. That was what he should have been hearing. Instead, he described the language he heard as not Arabic, the language of the Quran, not Urdu, the language of Pakistan, definitely not English. No, it was a language he had never ever heard before in his life. Almost akin to a very melodic song being sung by a person with an extremely husky and deep, bassy voice. Infuriated more so than curious, he checked his phone to see that, in fact, it was only 2:16 a.m. Adamant to find out who had the audacity to mess around inside a mosque this late. He sprinted towards the mosque. He entered the mosque and noticed that all the lights were off, and his visibility was limited to the moonlight illuminating parts of the huge chamber where everyone gathers to pray. Sitting where the imam sits at the very head of the podium was a thing wearing the imam's traditional clothes, which were a very long, white silk robe covering from below the neck till the ankle, accompanied with the imam's white silk round cap, also a religious garment of sorts. The moonlight reflected sharply off the silk fabric. He swears that the room smelt of roses, the scent being so strong, my uncle thought he would pass out from it. The thing in question was clearly sitting on its knees, knelt over on the podium, singing its unknown song into the mosque microphone. The unusual part of it all was this, though. By the time my uncle's eyes adjusted to the dimly moonlit room, he realized that the thing had not noticed his presence, and hence did not stop whatever it was doing. My uncle knew immediately that the thing was not the imam, although it was dressed exactly like him. How did he know so for sure? Well, although he could not make out the face, as he could only see the thing from its backside, from its silhouette, he knew that even while its posture suggested that it was sitting on its knees, the thing was still easily 7 feet tall. As in, the thing was a good foot or more taller than my uncle, who was 6 feet plus himself, on its knees. Knowing exactly what it was, my uncle started screaming out the Islamic prayer used to ward off evil, known as the Ayatul Kursi. With sweaty palms, he grabbed his tabij, an Islamic pendant used to ward off evil, at which instance the thing turned its head towards him. According to what my uncle swore till the day he died, he could clearly make out its facial features from the full moon's light shining through the windows on a cloudless night. Or shall I say, its lack of facial features. It had no eyes, no nose, no ears, no mouth, no eyebrows. Nothing, just plain fair skin. When my uncle froze in his place, feeling the life drain out of him, the thing slowly turned around completely, more like a dog or a four-legged animal, rather than a human, and ever so slowly started crawling towards my uncle on all fours, more like on its elbows and knees, in a gruesome display of impossible physical agility, its white silk robes and hat still glistening in the moonlight. The slow crawl turned into a full-paced sprint towards my uncle, which was the last thing he remembered. Later, he was awoken by 4 known faces peering down at him, the sun shining brightly above them. One of those faces belonged to the imam, who was the first person to find my uncle passed out. My uncle's face was wet, maybe from cold sweats, or from his associates' attempts to revive him with water, and he was running a high fever. Eventually, when he got around, he shared his experience with his rescuers, especially the imam. Now here's the strangest bit of it all. As previously mentioned, the imam was the only one with singular access to the mosque via the keys to the main gate. Remember, he has to open the mosque every single day to initiate the far procession, which means essentially he is the first one to enter the mosque every single day, except for that particular day. You see, when he opened the mosque's main gate, walked past the courtyard and inside, my uncle was already there, passed out, dressed for prayers. The imam was the first person to open the gates to the mosque on that day, just like every other day, with the keys which only he possessed. So how exactly did my uncle get inside a locked mosque, a good 3 hours before the imam opened it for the first time that day, in order to initiate the far prayers, let alone experience everything he experienced and pass out for others to discover him? How the heck did he get inside in the first place? Till the day he died, every version of this story has remained unchanged, with him simply walking into the mosque out of enraged curiosity and experiencing what he experienced. The mosque's gates being left open for him to enter, a direct contradiction to what the imam says, even to this day. This was but a humble attempt by me to recount his story exactly as I had heard it more than a year ago. Perhaps even more so curiously, other than my uncle, no one else heard that strange language blaring over the speakers on that particular night, nor has anyone heard it ever since. My uncle's mental condition, however, deteriorated rapidly since that night. Within a year, he was deemed uncurable by the best psychologists from all over the world, including the Italian miracle man himself, Dr. Bijol. Thankfully, I was amongst the first people to hear in details what exactly happened that night while my uncle was still sane. He passed away a week ago while living out the last of his days in the best psychiatric ward at Singapore. Towards the end, his mental condition deteriorated to the point of high-level schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder, wherein he spoke in made-up, non-existent languages and woke up in the middle of the night, screaming bloody murder. In one instance, he was found gnawing on his wrist, almost to the point of his wrist bone being exposed. 2 days later, he passed away. Think what you may of what you have just read. It won't change the fact that this is a 100% true account of events involving my uncle, which I believe lead to his eventual state of psychosis and death. Everyone who heard this story has seen the 7-foot-tall entity in question. If you are unfortunate enough to come across it, your experience will be followed by a bout of extremely high fever, which will last a day or two. Nothing more serious than that. My mother, father, siblings, and numerous other relatives have seen it and battled a bout of crippling, high fever for the next day or two. As you may have guessed by now, I am one of only 2 people who has not yet run into this entity, whether in its physical or any other form. It may have something to do with me being an atheist, not believing in a higher power and such. I dread the day I may have such an experience, though. If you fall victim, don't worry, my uncle is its only fatality ever, at least to my knowledge. Third story, The Dark Jinn. I am not a writer. I do not know how people use words and do wonders. All I know is this. I found that I was walking in the dark, alone, with only one house visible in countryside with a graveyard to my left and paddy rice field to my right. What am I doing here? Is this a dream? I thought. I have never touched alcohol, drugs. Was I drugged? Why am I not at my home warm and secure? Thoughts racing in my mind. I was hoping that it was a dream, but no, it was real. I could feel it. Now I remembered, as I briskly walked towards the only house I could see, I was supposed to be on a bus. The last thing I could recall was that I was on a bus, and the bus had stopped for dinner. There were 40-odd other passengers with me. Where were they? As I reached the house, I felt heavy. The house was a traditional rural Indian home made of mud with no furniture. I got in. It was spacious to my surprise. That was what I think now, but it was the last thing on my mind then. No one was in there. Scared, could feel my heart in my mouth. I couldn't go further than the first room. I retired there and waited for sun to rise. I thought I would be dead by morning. Night was long, very long. I fell asleep, only to be woken up back on the rough road where I had started. I was shivering. I ran away from home. I had seen him, only briefly, but yes, I had seen him. It was just like dream. His long black darkened hands. His big head, unusual long features. I had seen him earlier as well. When I had alighted from the bus for dinner, I had gone to pee in the fields as the Daba's washroom was under construction, cheap Indian restaurant on a highway. I had lost consciousness after seeing his dark face. I had probably pissed him off when I peed on burned crops. Maybe it was his food. Funny, right? Maybe you won't find it funny if it happened with you and your life is ruined. The second time I had seen him was in that abandoned home. He had caught me by head and dragged me out. I ran. I couldn't see anything, but I was just running. I had lost my right shoe. The rough road was hurting my foot. My socks were torn. After half an hour of the marathon, I could see the highway, but exactly then someone pushed me and I fell and stumbled. I had probably broken my face and knees. I lost my consciousness, but before that I could feel something cool on my face. Blood. I woke up in a government hospital next day. It was hard to explain to police what had happened. They thought me to be a gang member, blah blah. I called home, and next day was picked up by my cousin. I was in hospital for 3 days. I reached home. I was relieved. It had finally ended, but I was in bed for weeks. First I had fever, then appendicitis, then kidney stone. I would never be well. Something or other illness always got me. I finally recovered, but I am very thin and pale. My girlfriend dumped me because people say I am not normal. But I finally got back on track a bit and rejoined work. One day when I came back home from office, I found my lost right shoe near the kitchen door. He is dark black, red eyes. Sometimes he is taller than usual. He does not like perfumes. He likes to eat bones and burn wood. He is probably an outcast in his society. He is a criminal and he does stuff for magicians and astrologers. He still comes and visits me. He won't leave me or forgive me till I die. Fourth story. A jury of Jinn. I usually don't answer phone calls from family back home, as it's almost always family asking for something, and usually that something is money. But one night I got a call from my cousin at 2 a.m. I declined the call and silenced my phone. When I woke up, I had 20 missed calls. This must be serious, I thought to myself. I sat on the edge of my bed and called him back. There was no answer. I checked my voice messages. None of the messages he left gave any insight. It was just him panicking. I called my mom to see if she knew what was going on. She said she didn't know. Then when I got home, he called again. "Ollie, you have to help me?" Heron shouted. "You have to? What happened? What's wrong?" I asked him. "I'm on trial. I don't even know what I did. It's not fair. I can't even see them." Nothing Heron said made any sense, but I just let him talk. I rolled my eyes when I heard he was in court again. He had a way of getting into trouble. "Well, how much is the bail?" "I get paid this week." "Ollie, listen to me, man. It's not like that." "No, it's fine. I'll send it this week." I was on trial by Jinn. They kidnapped me, and there was a whole jury. And they were so mad at me. "Heron, what the hell are you talking about?" I was getting annoyed at this point. He's a prankster, but this has gone too far. That's when he started crying. In all my years of knowing him and visiting him back home, I have never heard or seen him cry. "You don't understand," he cried. "I'm sorry. Tell me what happened." "I'll listen." "I'm sorry." We talked for almost 2 hours. I had to Google everything after we spoke. I heard of Jinn before, but I never knew they were real. Apparently, Heron was dumping trash in one area by his house. Because humans can't physically see Jinn, he didn't know that he threw some trash on one of their family members. They went home and complained, and then the leaders or chief, I don't know what you'd call them, well, they decided to hold a trial. Heron woke up one night in great pain and incredibly dizzy to realize he was being dragged by his feet toward a cave. He tried everything to get free, but nothing worked. Finally, when he arrived, he saw some figures. Then he saw a jury of 12. He said they weren't quite human and they weren't quite animals. That's when he wondered if they could be Jinn. Only one could communicate with Heron. After he panicked upon seeing them, one explained why he was brought there. He explained to Heron that he had been throwing trash in an area where one of their children was sleeping. Heron apologized, pleaded, and begged for mercy. He explained that he couldn't see Jinn and he didn't mean to hurt anyone. The Jinn gathered together in a circle and excluded Heron. That's when they decided his punishment. "Ollie, I wish the punishment had been a beating or something. I could handle that." I hesitated to ask, What did they decide on?" "I can now see Jinn. At all times, everywhere." They thought that'd resolve the issue, and I'd never make the mistake of dumping anything on them again. Well, did it? Of course, but now I see them everywhere, all the time. It's scary. I can't handle it. I'm always scared. I don't leave the house anymore, but sometimes they walk by my window. Sometimes they're in my room. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help. Just believe me. Nobody else believes me. I have to call you back." Heron's tone changed. He hung up, and I didn't hear from him again. I've decided to take time off work and go back home to see if I can find him. I need to know if he's okay. Fifth story. A Jinn followed me home from the Gulf War. I'm talking about the first war with Iraq under H.W. Bush in 1990, just to be clear. I was stationed at a U.S. base in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Saddam threw his Scud missiles at us, but he was such a bad shot, they landed in the middle of nowhere. Fortunately for everyone, unfortunately for me. The middle of nowhere in Arabia is called the Empty Quarter. It is the vastest contiguous desert in the world. It is the size of Texas. Humans don't live there, but something else does. I was assigned to recover what the Scuds carried. My job was to find the Scud, identify the payload, and collect any remnants of that payload. You see, Saddam had all kinds of poison gas, and we knew from what he did to the Kurds that he wasn't afraid of using them. WMDs are no joke, so if the Scud doesn't explode and a missile full of mustard gas is sitting in the desert, it could find its way into a dirty bomb under New York. My job was to make sure that never happened. Finding this Scud wasn't easy. Radar and satellite only tracked it to a general location within the Empty Quarter. I drove with my team into the desert, to the last human settlement before the world turns into an endless waste. This was the patch of sand the Bedouins of the Al-Mara tribe called home. They lived mostly as they had for millennia, in a cluster of sheepskin tents, aided only by their camels. In a 20th century twist, they all had AK-47s, and they greeted us by pointing those AKs in our faces. These tribesmen looked like they came out of a Bible story, dressed in simple cloaks with white turbans wrapped around their heads. Their sheik was slightly fancier, a heavy-set man of about 60. He wore the typical red and white Saudi headdress. His beard was dyed red, and he walked with a plain, wooden cane. "Peace be upon you, O sheik," I said in my best Arabic. I'm good with languages and picked it up after taking a few classes and conversing with allied Arab soldiers. We come with the peace and blessings of God. So we unloaded the boxes of rice, bread, and canned supermarket goods that nomadic hunters don't get to eat. These were treats to them, and their trust would help us get to the Scud. We talked within the hospitality of the sheik's tent. Floor cushions embroidered with red and black stripes stretched across the inside. He served us that rich Arabic coffee that makes an Italian espresso taste like baby milk. "You are looking for the missile. We all saw it," the sheik said. "Did it explode?" I asked. "It happened at night." The sheik gulped his coffee. The ground did not shake, and the horizon did not light up with fire. "Can you tell us exactly where it fell?" "Yes, but you cannot go there." "We can go anywhere. Even if it's in a mountain, we'll fly up with a chopper." "You cannot go there because it is forbidden." The sheik arose and walked out of the tent. I followed him to a well. Little Bedouin boys were playing tag around it. There was something odd about their faces, about their eyes. I only got a glance, but I swear, they had no pupils. The sheik told them to go home, and they ran off. "These are the lands of the Al-Mara," the sheik said, "and have been for thousands of years. But those lands—" He stared down into the depths of the well. I peered down with him. The chasm seemed endless. "Well, whose lands are they?" I asked. "They belong to a different tribe." He tapped his cane against the ground. "A tribe of the Jinn?" The sheik explained the details to me. God created man out of clay and Jinn out of smoke. The two creations live in separate dimensions here on this earth. But there are places where these dimensions cross. In the Empty Quarter, there is one such place. But that's not all. There are many tribes of Jinn. Some are good, some are wicked. In the Empty Quarter live such a wicked tribe of Jinn that God forbade them from ever leaving. There is one loophole, though. Those Jinn are imprisoned there, and they all want to leave, the sheik said. But God has forbidden them from leaving. There is only one way they can get out, and that is from within a human body. I wish I'd listened to the old man, but I wasn't interested in cautionary tales for Bedouin children. I bribed one of the young men of the tribe with a 500 rial note, worth about $130, and he told me what we needed to know. The operation went perfectly. I didn't notice anything strange about the patch of sand where the unexploded scud lay. We recovered the scud's 6-ton payload in a truck, and were back in Riyadh by evening the next day. After that assignment, I was sent to Kuwait as part of the Liberation Force. Saddam rained scuds on us all day, but none of them hit. It was an easy win for good ol' Uncle Sam, and when the war was over, I came home like everyone else. Some came home in body bags, others with PTSD, and some came home just fine. I thought I was the latter, but I came home with a Jinn that wants to kill me. The day I came home was the happiest in my life. My 6-year-old Daniel had grown so much. He jumped into my arms while my wife, Angela, hugged us both. For now, Uncle Sam was done defending the world so I could be with my family. The next day, we barbecued steaks in the backyard, and I bought my son a trampoline. Don't jump too high, or an eagle will snatch you. I told him. Daniel laughed it off. He was already too old for such bullshit. Angela made us delicious lemonade, and later that night we all lay in the grass and gazed at the stars. That one is called Algol, I said, pointing at a bright star in the Perseus constellation. It's Arabic for demon. I pretended like I was a demon, grabbed my son, and tickled him. I can't describe how good it felt to enjoy the mundane with my family. You know Arabic, Daddy? Daniel asked. At that age, sons are so impressed with their fathers. I do. And if you ever meet an Arab, you should say to them, Assalamu alaikum. Aslam alaikum. What's that mean, Daddy? It means peace be upon you. But my peace was about to evaporate, like a glass of water under the scorching desert sun. Because the next morning, I saw the Jinn. In fact, I see it every morning. I can only see it in the moments between sleep and wakefulness, when my body is paralyzed. A pitch-black creature, as if covered in soot. It's so tall, the ceiling forces it to bend its back at a right angle, so that its head is right over my bed. Its face looks strangely human, but its eyes have no pupils like those little Bedouin boys playing around the well. It says to me in Arabic, Today you will die. Today you will die. Today you will die. It repeats this incantation until I wake up. And when I do, I spend each day trying not to die. The Jinn itself cannot kill me. It can only affect me. Sometimes when I'm driving, it will conjure this fog into my head and body that makes everything so heavy that I want nothing more than to sleep. I've been in 3 car crashes in the last 26 years and spent weeks in the hospital as a result. But I'm still alive. Last month I was chopping vegetables with a kitchen knife, and it told me there was a treasure in my wrist, a magic whistle. And if I got it out and blew on it, Angela and Daniel would come back to life. When the EMTs found me passed out with my wrist mangled, of course they thought it was a suicide attempt. How typical for a veteran to try to kill himself. The month of therapy, paid for with your tax dollars, didn't cure me of the Jinn. I've called every kind of exorcist. Islamic, Catholic, Jewish, hell, even Zoroastrian. They performed every kind of exorcism. The Jinn is not affected at all. I realize now what that old sheik called Jinn may be something else. Because these creatures surely were not created by God. Truth be told, I don't even know if I believe in God. But I know I believe in the devil. Call me a stereotype, but I like guns. I had a Mosin Nagant, an old Russian World War II rifle that I kept locked in a gun cabinet. Target practice with the old beast was one of the few things that took the edge off of life. About a year after I returned from the war, I was cleaning the bore of the gun in my kitchen, while my wife and son bounced on the trampoline in the yard. The Jinn told me to look in the sky. There was a scud coming, a rocket flying through the heavens. The whine of the scud pierced the air and boomed through my ears. I knew unless I shot it down, the explosion and payload of mustard gas would kill everyone in sight, my family included. I assembled and loaded my gun, rushed into the yard, and shot at the scud in the sky. That was the only time I'd heard the Jinn laugh, like the broken notes of a piano. Daniel lay spread out on the trampoline, with a bullet hole in his head from my Mosin Nagant. The sky was clear, and my wife's shriek replaced the booming of the scud. Angela hung herself 12 days later. I would have done the same, but I don't want to die. The court declared me insane, and I spent 24 years in a loony bin where getting killed or killing yourself was as impossible as it gets. The Jinn did not like that, but it was its fault. After all this time, I think I finally know how to get rid of it. No, I'm not going to kill myself. Despite all that's happened, I want to live. I realize now that the Jinn wants me dead because it is literally stuck inside me, the same way it was stuck in the empty quarter. When it went inside me 27 years ago, it traded one prison for another. But if I die, then it's free to roam the world and maybe find someone else to torment. That's all it wants, so that's what I'll give it. I'm going to go into cardiac arrest to stop my heart, but a few minutes before I do that, I'll call 911 so that the EMTs can arrive in time to revive me. That way, the Jinn will be able to escape the prison that is my life, and I'll come back from the dead. I might suffer some brain damage, but if I time it right, it will be minimal. I saw this on a show called House once. The main character sticks a knife in a socket to electrocute himself and stop his heart, so he can find out if there is an afterlife. But because he's in a hospital, he's revived after a few minutes. So here I go, dialing 911. I can already hear the ambulance sirens, and I can see the Jinn, its body at a right angle and its head twisted on its long neck. It's smiling at me with the whitest eyes. Now it's laughing its broken piano laugh, like the day when it made me kill my son. And I realize, what if this is a trick? What if this is how it kills me? There's no going back. I'm leaving this note here, so just in case I don't return, you all know my story. Maybe in those moments between life and death, I'll see Angela and Daniel, and they'll hug me like the day I came home from the war. Because the truth is, I never came home, but maybe I can now. So here I go. Wish me luck, and peace be upon you all. 6th story. What I know of the Jinn. So just so you know, what I'm about to tell you isn't a scientific or even a normal viewpoint by most Western people. It's more of a spiritual explanation based on religious writings of Eastern cultures. Frankly, I can't positively tell you that I believe in it, but it makes most sense to me because growing up, I heard stories from my grandma, parents, and elders in general. And for the record, I'm American, born and raised, so I'm not writing you from some village in Iraq or something. LOL. So a Jinn is a being not from our world, obviously, but has the ability to appear to humans in various forms. The viewpoint is religious scripture in Islam and Judaism, and even the Bible describe humans beings as made from clay. Jinn are known to be made from flameless fire. When you look at the hood of a car during a super hot summer day, and it appears to be so hot that what you see right above the hood is almost like a vapor coming off of it, that's what Jinn are made of. They have no sense of time and not ones who use intellect, but have powers to do things humans can't. When I was a kid, someone from my family had told me not to pour hot water outside. You may hurt or kill a Jinn's child. It said that there are no ghosts in this world, and that anything supernatural in our world is done by Jinn. Hauntings, possession, scary things in general, it's all from Jinn. When a person dies, their soul doesn't stick around or anything because of unfinished business, etc. If you've read any type of religious writing, you may remember that our human world is one of several worlds in this universe. Jinn reside in one of these levels and live as humans do. In groups, communities, cities, they have their own religions similar to ours. They have families. And the craziest part is that they can see us, and we can see them if they choose to show themselves. I've read they live in remote areas where there aren't too many people. Forests, jungles, deserts. I've heard they congregate near areas where water is perfectly still, and they eat bones and human/animal excrement. They lack intelligence, but have the power to change form and can gain knowledge of a person's deepest, darkest secrets. People have been known to gain control of a jinn and make the jinn complete various tasks for them that may be impossible for a person to do. But every story I've heard about a particular person having control of a jinn has ended in that person's eventual mysterious death. A story my grandma told me of when she was a girl, living in a small village in the Middle East. Her aunt was a lovely person. We'll call her Roxana, beautiful and desired by many young men wanting to marry her. Roxana's friends grew jealous of all the attention she was getting, especially one friend, Aisha. Aisha went to a man who supposedly knew a form of black magic and with a lock of Roxana's hair or a piece of fingernail could bring harm to her. Aisha was successful in getting a piece of Roxana's hair, and a few days later, Roxana began to grow pale and thinner. She would cough blood and get feverish. This went on for weeks and months, and no one could explain what was wrong with her. Her family finally went to a holy man who looked more like a crazy man, but they were desperate. And after reading a few prayers, he told the family that someone had indeed used black magic to bring harm to Roxana. He asked to stay in Roxana's room alone to figure out a solution. So the night the holy man stayed over, he brought a huge suitcase with him, and my grandma, being the curious little girl, asked him what was in it, but he wouldn't say. That night, my grandma peeked into Roxana's room to see what the holy man was up to. She saw the man open the big suitcase and pull out 3 statues and put them in front of him. He began to recite something under his breath, and slowly, those statues began to blink and speak. Those statues were being possessed by Jinn. The holy man would ask them questions regarding Roxana's health and how to make her better. The statues told him to go to the cemetery to a specific grave in a specific spot and dig a small hole and pull out what he finds. The holy man noticed the door move, and the statues almost instantly stopped moving. The holy man quickly put them in his suitcase and gave the little girl, my grandma, a suspicious look. So the holy man took Roxana's family to the cemetery and showed them the grave and where to dig. Roxana's father began to dig and found a small trinket box. In the box was a marrow bone wrapped in some sort of animal hide and hair, Roxana's hair. Within the marrow bone was a small piece of folded paper which had numbers written on it with Roxana's name, her father's and mother's name, and a short passage saying something along the lines of, "May she never find love. May she never find happiness. May she wither and suffer, but death not greet her." Several weeks passed, and Roxana started to get better and look better, but never quite recovered completely. Her rosy complexion never returned, and she later found out she was barren, never to have a child. The holy man was found dead several months later as well. 7th story, the mysterious Jinn. So just so you know, what I'm about to tell you isn't a scientific or even a normal viewpoint by most Western people. It's more of a spiritual explanation based on religious writings of Eastern cultures. Frankly, I can't positively tell you that I believe in it, but it makes most sense to me because growing up, I heard stories from my grandma, parents, and elders in general. And for the record, I'm American, born and raised, so I'm not writing you from some village in Iraq or something. LOL. So a jinn is a being not from our world, obviously, but has the ability to appear to humans in various forms. The viewpoint is religious scripture in Islam and Judaism, and even the Bible described humans beings as made from clay. Jinn are known to be made from smokeless fire. When you look at the hood of a car during a super hot summer day, and it appears to be so hot that what you see right above the hood is almost like a vapor coming off of it. That's what jinn are made of. They have no sense of time and not ones who use intellect, but have powers to do things humans can't. When I was a kid, someone from my family had told me not to pour hot water outside. You may hurt or kill a jinn's child. It said that there are no ghosts in this world, and that anything supernatural in our world is done by jinn. Hauntings, possession, scary things in general, it's all from jinn. When a person dies, their soul doesn't stick around or anything because of unfinished business, etc. If you've read any type of religious writing, you may remember that our human world is one of several worlds in this universe. Jinn reside in one of these levels and live as humans do. In groups, communities, cities, they have their own religions similar to ours. They have families. And the craziest part is that they can see us, and we can see them if they choose to show themselves. Their world is veiled from our eyes. I've read they live in remote areas where there aren't too many people. Forests, jungles, deserts. I've heard they congregate near areas where water is perfectly still, and they eat bones and human/animal excrement. They lack intelligence, but have the power to change form and can gain knowledge of a person's deepest, darkest secrets. People have been known to gain control of a jinn and make the jinn complete various tasks for them that may be impossible for a person to do. But every story I've heard about a particular person having control of a jinn has ended in that person's eventual mysterious death. A story my grandma told me of when she was a girl, living in a small village in the Middle East. Her aunt was a lovely person. We'll call her Roxana, beautiful and desired by many young men wanting to marry her. Roxana's friends grew jealous of all the attention she was getting, especially one friend, Aisha. Aisha went to a man who supposedly knew a form of black magic, and with a lock of Roxana's hair or a piece of fingernail could bring harm to her. Aisha was successful in getting a piece of Roxana's hair, and a few days later, Roxana began to grow pale and thinner. She would cough blood and get feverish. This went on for weeks and months, and no one could explain what was wrong with her. Her family finally went to a holy man who looked more like a crazy man, but they were desperate. And after reading a few prayers, he told the family that someone had indeed used black magic to bring harm to Roxana. He asked to stay in Roxana's room alone to figure out a solution. So the night the holy man stayed over, he brought a huge suitcase with him, and my grandma, being the curious little girl, asked him what was in it, but he wouldn't say. That night, my grandma peeked into Roxana's room to see what the holy man was up to. She saw the man open the big suitcase and pull out 3 statues and put them in front of him. He began to recite something under his breath, and slowly, those statues began to blink and speak. Those statues were being possessed by jinn. The holy man would ask them questions regarding Roxana's health and how to make her better. The statues told him to go to the cemetery to a specific grave in a specific spot and dig a small hole and pull out what he finds. The holy man noticed the door move, and the statues almost instantly stopped moving. The holy man quickly put them in his suitcase and gave the little girl, my grandma, a suspicious look. So the holy man took Roxana's family to the cemetery and showed them the grave and where to dig. Roxana's father began to dig and found a small trinket box. In the box was a marrow bone wrapped in some sort of animal hide and hair, Roxana's hair. Within the marrow bone was a small piece of folded paper which had numbers written on it with Roxana's name, her father's and mother's name, and a short passage saying something along the lines of, "May she never find love. May she never find happiness. May she wither and suffer, but death not greet her." Several weeks passed, and Roxana started to get better and look better, but never quite recovered completely. Her rosy complexion never returned, and she later found out she was barren, never to have a child. The holy man was found dead several months later as well.